Do you want to have the confidence to truly rock retirement? Well, I'm going to show you how on the Retirement Answer Man Show. Well, howdy. Welcome to the show. My name is Roger Whitney. I am your host. Now, this is week, 4? Because this is the 5-week month of a month-long series on retirement planning for non-planners. So the entire month, we've been really trying to talk to the people that aren't into retirement planning. They know they got to do it. They got to stay aware. Maybe their partner does it, their spouse or their advisor, and they're more delegators, but you still have to have control over things to direct the ship. So we've been talking about what things you should be looking at and trying to avoid all the gobbledygook that we financial people get into. And today we're going to talk about investment basics. So we're going to talk about things you should understand conceptually about investing your assets, and some questions you want to ask on an ongoing basis. Now, a little preview for October, because that's right around the corner. Thank goodness, because I'm crazy hot here in Texas. October is going to be a really big month. And as much as we've put the lingo aside this month and the geek hat on the hook, we're bringing them back out for next month because we're going to talk about tax management in retirement. And we've covered this topic before on the show, but a lot has changed. We've had the House Ways and Means Committee came out with their proposed tax changes that were pretty substantial. So we're going to explore those. And I'm going to have Andy Paco from Tenon Financial on for the entire month to explore tax management in retirement as a topic, but also start to bring in what proposed changes might be coming. And Andy is an expert at taxes. But if that wasn't enough, we're also going to have Wade Fowle from Retirement Researcher, who has a fantastic new book on retirement. It's a deep one. It's a heavy one. It's not for the non-planners. It's not for the average planner, at least to consume. Maybe a great reference book. But we're going to have Wade Fowle in to talk about his book and also to talk about tax management. And as amazing as Andy is at tax management on the technical side of doing things, Wade Fowle has this gift of academia and research to go so far deeper than anyone that I've ever met. So he's going to be a guest on the show. Andy Panko is going to be with us, and both Andy and Wade will be in the Rock Retirement Club to do special meetups so we can have conversations with them if you're a member of the Rock Retirement Club. What you can learn at rockretirementclub.com. But for now, let's get to our main theme of investment basics. So last week, Fritz Gilbert from Retirement Manifesto and I had a chat about retirement risks. And as Fritz and I do, we went a lot of different places. So hopefully, as a non-geeky person, it helped you understand some of the major risks of retirement planning. When it comes to investment management, the two big risks, like we talked about, were inflation, the eroding of your purchasing power, the value of your dollar over time on the long term, but on the short term, losing money, volatility, stocks going down. And that is essentially what we need to solve for in some way when you're investing all the savings that you've built up over time. And we need to invest in some way where we solve for inflation and volatility, or at least manage those, because we probably won't solve for them. So I'm going to use an analogy here when we're thinking about investment basics. I'm going to use a food analogy, and I've already eaten, so I'm not going to get too hungry. So maybe you want to have a muffin so you don't start making you want to grab some food. Nutrition, eating food, is essentially investing in your body, right? It's giving you the fuel you need to get up in the morning, walk around, play a game of pickleball, whatever your jam is. So we're going to use investing and nutrition as akin. So let's think about nutrition. On the short term, you got to have nutrition, right? You got to have protein, you got to have carbohydrates, all these things to give you that ready energy so you can have a great day, you can have a great week. And if you start to get behind that curve, it's really hard to catch up. If you start to let your short-term nutrition, you get undernourished, you're going to be lackadaisical. You're going to be hangry, I guess is a new term. So you got to make sure your short-term nutrition, you're getting that fuel so you can go do your stuff. So think of chicken and veggies, right? If you eat chicken, that's going to give you those proteins, those carbs, those fibers. Well, in investing, it's a little bit the same way. Cash, bonds, things that are ready to be used on a moment's notice and will pay you some interest and will always be there when you need it. So money on the short term is energy that you can use to go do your life. You can rock retirement. So that's short-term nutrition. And then if we go to the other end of the spectrum, let's talk about long-term nutrition, right? Long-term nutrition in terms of food isn't really as satisfying on the short term, right? It's not going to help you today necessarily. You take your multi-day vitamin that's going to give you your vitamins and your minerals and whatever else they put in there. Over the last 2 weeks, I've been eating every morning or drinking something called athletic greens, which is a robust mix of good long-term stuff. And it's a fine green powder that you mix with water. You drink it in the morning before you have anything in your stomach, and you leave it there for a while. And because it's fine and you do it on an empty stomach, first thing in the morning, in theory, it absorbs into your body to get those long-term nutrients into the system. But here's the thing with long-term nutrition, right? Vitamins, they don't, unless you have a gummy vitamin that has a lot of sugar in it, it's not going to be that satisfying. It's not going to do anything really for you for the day in terms of giving you energy so you can go rock retirement. But what it will do is invest in your body to go rock retirement years down the road. Make sense? And sometimes, as with this athletic greens, it can be an acquired taste. I personally don't mind the taste of athletic greens, which is this powder that I've been using, but it's not delicious. It's not as fulfilling as that cup of coffee I usually have in the morning, but I know it's good for me. And so I'm willing to deal with the short-term taste in my mouth every morning when I drink this little protein or this mix of the fine powder and water, because I know it's going to help me later on, or that's my theory anyway. So when we think of investing in our body, we can think of these long-term things that we do that don't really satisfy us in the moment. Now let's equate that to volatile assets, meaning things that can lose money quickly and can cause stress if the markets go down and we worry about all the time. Well, that could be stocks, owning a stock in companies like GE or Apple or whomever, or real estate investing. Those type of things don't really satisfy you in the near term, typically, or they're more apt not to. I mean, sure, if you buy a stock and it goes up, it feels good, but likely you're going to lose a 30-year money, even if you never sell anything every 3 to 5 years, because that's the price you pay. All that up and down and watching whatever's on the news is scary, and it's not very nourishing. But it's good for you because it will help guard against inflation. And we know long-term, the data shows it can be really healthy to have some things that don't taste really good in the moment. So when we think of investing and we're trying to solve for inflation on one end, the loss of our money long-term, or volatility on the short end, losing money on the short end, if you use this nutrition analogy, we have to have that ready-made energy, in this case, secure cash, so we can fuel our life now, but we want to keep investing in our future self to have a healthy body so we can have resources later on in life. And that's the balance we got to try to get. Fritz and I talked a little bit about that last week. So if we have that as a conceptual framework, this can be really helpful when you're interacting with your spouse or your advisor, or when you're looking at it. What am I doing to nourish my body this year, next year, and the year after? Because I have to have my protein and my carbs, or I'm going to be hangry or sad or lackadaisical. And then how am I nourishing my body long-term so I can be healthy when I'm 85? Same thing goes with investing. So now let's talk about, well, how do I do that? How do I actually invest my money? We're going to continue with this food analogy. Well, you can buy each ingredient individually And what that means is you could simply say, I'm going to eat bananas. That's my one investment in my short term, or maybe it's a candy bar. I can eat bananas or a candy bar, and I'm just going to eat that to give me my short term nutrition. Well, there can be side effects to that, right? I don't know what the side effects to bananas are, but I'm sure there are some. You're going to get sick of them, and it's either going to work or it's going to give you some things that you're not super happy about. Or maybe you eat 3 or 4 foods, right? I eat bananas, I eat apples, I eat broccoli, and I eat chicken. And that's all I'm going to eat. That's one way to go about it. Another way to go about it is if you're going to buy the ingredients individually, is you pick a recipe. This is something that's going to have a lot of things in it that I have designed or picked a design, and then I'm going to go implement that design or that recipe. So you pick your recipe, you go out and buy your ingredients, and then you go home and you bake your recipe, right? You cut up the broccoli and you cut up the chicken and grill it up, and it could be countless things, and you put it all together, and now you have your, we'll call it a portfolio. You have your dish that's on your plate that you're going to eat, and you created it all. The only little wrinkle when we're thinking about investments is when you create your portfolio a la carte by picking the recipe and the ingredients is I guess it's the same. You got to redo it in a systematic way. That means tomorrow you got to pick another recipe, or maybe the same recipe, go buy more ingredients and create it again. Well, when you're investing your assets, all the money that you have, if you're going to take this approach, then you're going to have to figure out the portfolio that you want that satisfies you on the near term and satisfies you on the long term. And then you're going to have to go find the recipe and then find all the ingredients and then keep repeating and repeating and repeating. That's one way to invest. Another way to invest would be to buy a ready-made dinner for the near term, the midterm, and the long term. So if you need energy today, rather than just eat a banana or find a recipe, find a manufactured portfolio or recipe that's already created for you. That way you don't have to go buy all the ingredients. You don't have to have all the tools in the kitchen. And it's a lot easier than having to keep remaking a meal every day. Same thing with a portfolio. And so if you're going to buy a ready-made dinner, first thing you need to do is decide, well, what do I feel like eating? And just like a 3-course meal, you're going to have your salad, your entree, and your dessert. Well, in portfolio management, you're going to have those near-term nutrition so you can have energy today. You're going to have part of the meal or the portfolio be energy for 3 to 7 years from now. And then you're going to have part of the meal be long-term portfolio that will give you energy and hopefully grow your assets for your 10, 20-year-old self. So those layers of assets. So you're actually going to have 3 dishes in the simplistic example of portfolios. So you'll need to decide, what portion do I need to have of my short-term meal, my midterm meal, and my long-term meal. Once you have that figured out, and again, as the non-manager, you don't have to figure this out, because one, if you're going to manage it yourself, you'll have to learn how to figure it out. Or if you have a spouse or a partner and they're doing this, they can figure it out, or your advisor can help you figure that out. You just need to be aware of these big rock concepts so you can own the management of your assets, even if you're delegating all the messiness of it, right? And so once you figure out the portions of those dishes, you have to say, okay, what options are available to me for each one of those dishes, the short, medium, and long-term portfolios? And those are going to take the form of, say, mutual funds. That's essentially what a mutual fund is. A mutual fund is like a ready-made dinner. And a cash, a money market, or a bond fund is a ready-made dinner for the short term or the medium term. They're pre-designed. All the ingredients are in there, generally thousands of ingredients. And you can just buy mutual fund, short-term bond fund, and that is going to be the nourishment for short term, because it's going to be relatively stable. It's not going to go up and down in theory or statistically. It won't go up and down a lot. It may pay you some interest, but it will be there when you need it. And then you keep going out the spectrum in your 100% stock fund, where you own all these stocks, the stock market. That is going to be your very long-term portfolio. And you can buy a mutual fund that is designed for the very long term. And you can just buy it just like you would buy a TV dinner or a frozen lasagna. You can find the options for each of those segments when you go through the food aisle of portfolios. From there, you'll want to decide, where do you want to be on the spectrum from organic dinners to manufactured dinners? So what do I mean by that? Well, let's think of, I saw an ad today for the old TV dinners we used to eat. I used to eat when I was a kid, in the the tinfoil tray, the Hungry Man dinners, the Salisbury steak dinners. I saw a photo of one of those on the Twitter account that I think is hilarious because it has all those old photos. So that is going to be a very manufactured dinner that is going to in some way nourish you, but it's going to have, I guess there's some meat in there in the steak, but if you looked at the ingredients, it's going to be a lot of things that are very long words that we can't pronounce and don't even know what the heck they are. But it's simple and it's designed and it's probably going to cost a little bit more. So that's the manufactured end of the spectrum. This very scientifically designed meal with stuff we don't understand. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have the organic meal or the organic portfolio. And that's going to be, throwing some lingo here, an index, just a big basket of fruit or a big basket of stocks or a big basket of bonds that are chosen from a basic model. We can pretty much understand everything that's in it. It doesn't change. It is what it is. And so you'll have to decide, do you want to have just big baskets of actual food, meaning investments of stocks or bonds or what have you? Or do you want to have something that may be more appealing and sexy on the cover, but has a lot of things that we don't understand? And the interesting thing about investing is that, unlike food, where if you buy organic, it always costs more. Not always, but typically costs more than the manufactured stuff, right? If I buy the organic salad, it costs more than buying just the random head of lettuce that may have had whatever they do to regular heads of lettuce. In the investment world, organic tends to be a lot less expensive. If you buy the big basket of stocks that represent, say, the big basket of fruits with all different kinds of fruits, it's generally going to cost less than the manufactured basket of stocks and things we don't understand. So it's a little different that way. But that is the hierarchy of how you think it. What plates do I need? What dinners do I need from short-term, medium, and long-term in terms of portfolio? Decide on your taste and then find the options available and then figure out how organic do I want to be to how expensive and manufactured do I want to be. So conceptually, hopefully that gave you a mental picture of investment basics. So my suggestion would be, for most people, you want to focus on having your short-term portfolio. Short-term, I'll define as 1 to 5 years. And then your midterm portfolio or dish, that should be 5 to 10 years-ish. And then your long-term portfolio or dish, that is for more than 10 years. Those three are the building blocks. And then I personally would stay as organic as possible, having a manufactured product like a index type fund that is just buying a big basket of lots of different fruits or lots of different stocks rather than trying to manage what goes in and out of the basket. And so what you want to ask, if you're talking to your spouse and you're reviewing your portfolio, your investment portfolio, or your advisor, you want to ask this: what is nourishing me in the short term? If I'm worth $1 million in money, investments, what portion of that is nourishing me in the short term? And how is it nourishing me? Am I eating a big basket of fruits, or am I paying more for a manufactured basket that is curated over time? And then you want to ask, what's nourishing me in the midterm? Okay, if that's going to give me energy for my life for the next 5 years, what's the plan to give me energy for my life from 5 to 10 years? And then lastly, what's going to provide for me after 10 years? And your spouse or your advisor should be able to delineate for you of that $1 million. Here's the money that's available. Here's the money that makes up each one of those dishes or those portfolios for you. And here's how we chose to do it. We're just buying all the little pieces together and making our own recipe, or we're using a hungry man dinner, or we're buying a big basket of diversified fruit or whatever. They should be able to answer that, and that will give you, they should be able to. And if you get those answers, now you can have a sense for, now you can start thinking, I got way too much for my, in that last plate, that long-term dinner, and I don't feel like I'm going to have enough energy on the short term because my energy needs went up because I now am spending money on golf. Maybe we need to change that dish. If you can get answers to those 3 questions very clearly, you're about 80% of the way there. And many times 80% is enough. What's nourishing me on the short term? What's nourishing me on the midterm? And what's nourishing me on the long term? Those are the things you want to understand clearly when you're retirement planning. And now next week, we're going to go on a macro sense because we've covered a lot of topics here. We're going to try to boil it down to 5 things you should be tracking over time to know that you're on a feasible plan that is sustainable, that is managing all the stuff that we've talked about. And I'm not going to guarantee that it's 5. It could be 6, it could be 8, but I'm going to try to make it 5. 5 sounds good. And then hopefully that will put you in a great place to maintain control and agency, even if you don't have to do all the work. But for now, let's go to listener questions. Well, welcome to the question and answer session. One of my favorite parts of the show. For one reason, I always get to have someone with me. And again, I get to have Nicole Rockstar Mills. How you doing, Nicole?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Are you going to say poop this week?
Boy, I sure hope not, but I didn't plan on it last week. So we'll see.
We'll watch our P's and Q's. If you have a question for the show, you can go to rogerwhitney.com/Ask Roger. We love answering your questions, and we try to really answer your question. We try not to be politicians.
If you want to help me out so I don't mispronounce your question, you could leave us an audio question.
That might be a safe bet. So why don't we get going with the first question?
All righty. So our first question is from Joe, and he said, this week, the organization that examines the retirement trust fund said that in roughly 12 years, the benefits will have to be cut if there are not changes made to Social Security, either to cut benefits or increase taxes. Since cutting benefits is unlikely, what are some solutions that should be promoted to Congress and the White House to make sure that retirees do not have their benefits cut? Additionally, I'm not sure.
I'll cover that.
I stopped paying taxes. He's asking about income above $142,000. What would happen if the limit were lifted completely?
It's a really good question, Joe. And I saw the report that came out, and these kind of reports with the solvency of Social Security, we see these things periodically, and we've seen some iteration from the government, probably not quite as often as we should, that have addressed prior issues. And definitely after COVID and the disruption to work life, it makes sense that we're probably not in as good a shape as we were pre-COVID. And so what Joe is talking about is the Social Security Administration has, we'll call it a trust fund, and they take in taxes to this fund, and they use those to pay current recipient of Social Security benefits. And so as you get more and more people, meaning baby boomers, receiving benefits, you have to have enough people paying taxes into the system. The youngins like Nicole here, you should earn more money. Wait a second, I'd have to pay you. Okay, never mind. But the more youngins have to pay into the system, and because the baby boomer was this boom of babies, that it was this big bulge in the demographic chart. We're getting all these people that are getting benefits, and they're living longer, so they're not dying as quickly as they used to, which means the benefits get paid for a longer period of time. You can see how this can be a really bad solution. So the solvency of Social Security, will you get your Social Security benefit? Or how do we fix it? is essentially what you're asking there, Joe. I am definitely not a policy expert. My position on this as a retirement planner is I assume that when I'm dealing with people over 50, so they're either in their 50s or 60s, so they're very close to accessing the benefit, I assume that they're going to be receiving the benefit. And then I pay attention to what might happen from an adjustment standpoint. You can always stress test if we don't get Social Security, and that's an easy stress test to do in a retirement plan. But I assume it's going to be there. So if you ask me, what are the likely solutions? When I have looked at this in an organized fashion, my determination was, reading the experts that think about this all day, it's actually a pretty easy fix to make it sustainable for a lot longer. Functionally, it's really the political will to be able to do it. So what could you do? One, and you suggested this, is you could increase the ceiling on income for what you pay FICA or Social Security taxes. So what Joe meant by that is, I don't even know what the limit is this year, I guess 142.5, if I believe Joe, is when you earn your income, you pay into the Social Security system. But then when you hit a certain income level, I was going to try to pull my chart out. I'll just assume it's 142.8, I believe is what it is. When you get above the income limit, you stop paying Social Security taxes. So if you earn $1 above the limit, you actually get more of that dollar coming home because they stop taking Social Security out. So one possible solution is to increase that limit of how much income you have to pay this Social Security tax. That would bring more money into the system, or eliminate it. So millionaires pay FICA on all of their income, even if it's $1,001. So that's one solution. Another solution is increase the retirement age, the age in which you can get the benefit. That's a possibility, and they've done that in the past. Another solution could be changing the taxation on Social Security benefits, because currently, if you are receiving Social Security at past full retirement age, if you earn income above certain levels, and we've covered this in other shows, I won't be long for Nicole's sake, they start taxing your Social Security benefits. So they could change how that happens to essentially it becomes a mean testing, right? Or they could increase the flat amount that they tax FICA on actual wages. All of those are possible solutions, or any combination of those things. And the last time I looked at it in an organized way, I'm not going to say fix the problem, but pushed it off a long period of time. It's just getting the political will to do it. And I think Winston Churchill said about the US, it's like, we're going to exhaust everything we can before we actually take action. We're very slow to take action on things politically.
Just clarifying, this is not saying that the benefits are going away, just that they would be cut, right?
That is an option. Yeah. If you think of cutting benefits, you can actually cut benefits, or you could change the limits on when Social Security becomes taxable and how much they're taxed. Right. That would be essentially cutting benefits too.
Right. But you mentioned earlier, like you can estimate in your retirement planning, like not receiving Social Security, but that's not really what the question was, right?
Yeah. He was wondering, how do you fix the problem where it becomes insolvent in 12 years? I have some people that don't want to include it in there just as a hedge.
Because they think it's just not going to be there. Okay.
Yeah. I'm hesitant to make decisions doing that because it is a benefit. Governments have proven that they don't take away benefits, even if it's not fiscally responsible not to. And if you take the position, I'm not going to include Social Security, or I'm going to say it's going to be 50% of what I'm promised, you can do that, but that has consequences in your decision making. It may make you work 3 years longer. It may make you spend less in early retirement. So you got to just be sure you're comfortable with the consequences of making an assumption about what might happen 10, 12 years into the future.
Right. Our next question is a comment, and it's just something nice for you. Roger, I just wanted to say how helpful your Rock Retirement book is. I've read it twice now and will probably read it again. P.S. The podcast is great too. It's from Stephen.
Well, thank you, Stephen. That actually means a lot right now, because I was just having a conversation with someone the other day about my book. And I don't talk about my book
You
much.
haven't talked about your book in a really long time.
Yeah. By the way, I have a book. It's called Rock Retirement. We have a link to it on our website. I'm sure you can find it on Amazon. I haven't talked a lot about my book, and I was having this conversation. So let's talk about why I wrote it. So came out a couple years ago, and I was reading every retirement book you could find. And I do that normally because I'm nerdy that way. And they all bored the heck out of me. Not all, but that's dramatic. But they were very technical, tactical focused. Roth conversions, all the tactics of retirement planning, and written by financial geeks because we're all financial advisors or researchers. And in my opinion, there was just too much focus on optimizing what I call the bling of financial planning. All these tactical decisions, let's take Social Security claiming, and just overthinking that and missing the whole point of retirement in the first place, which is harvesting, using your resources to create a life when you have a lot of freedom. When your work life slows down and you have this period of time when you really can create whatever kind of life that you want, and you're mature enough and hopefully financially secure enough that you have options. There wasn't a lot of talk about that. And I feel like that's the whole point. If you get all the tactical things in financial planning right, you can miss your life and have all these regrets later in life. And that's horrible. And so I purposely wrote the book in a very consumable way, in a very simple way, to make sure that we focus on the right things, which is creating a great life. And yes, being a good financial steward, but not letting financial decision-making getting in the way of your life. And the reason maybe sometimes I don't talk about it, and I still have to do the audiobook, and I think I'm having some head trash, as Tanya calls it, Nicole, is one, I've never written a book before. And so there's so many things I would change in it in hindsight because it was the first time I've done it. Two, in my mind, I compare it, like Wade Pfau came out with an amazing book, a very comprehensive technical book. In fact, he's going to be on the show next month. And I'm very technically competent, but Wade is like way off the charts down the rabbit hole of technical. And you compare internally, this is just internal trash. You compare yourself to that and you feel like, well, mine seems really simple compared to something like that. And it's silly. This is my personal head trash. But
comparison is the thief of joy.
It so is. But Stephen, I'm glad you like the book. Rock Retirement is meant for people that, one, really aren't into this. They want to have a great life and they don't want to get into Nerdville. So that fits the theme of this month. And it's also for the very technical people to make sure they don't miss the forest for the trees. And the forest is rock and retirement. So thank you, Stephen. It really helped me. And this is something I got to get over myself.
Our next question is from Philip, and I really like the way he wrote his question. He says, hi, I've been listening to the Retirement Answer Man show for a couple years now and enjoy the info and vibe you and your guests generate. Thanks. But I keep waiting and waiting and waiting. For what? Waiting for the Retirement Answer Man show or any one of the dozen or so other personal finance podcasts I regularly listen to take on a subject that is so big, so important, and so prevalent that you could spend an entire year of shows on it. A subject that affects a huge swath of the retiring population in the immediate future. A subject that encompasses questions of strategy, timing, financing, tax structuring, succession, emotion, and much, much more. What is it? The sale of a small business to fund retirement. I feel like this is a very dramatic lead-in.
Yeah. Oh, well, Philip, when you sell your business, we will hire you as a writer.
Why does this subject get no traction?
It's a great question, Philip. I think years ago, we talked about selling businesses and navigating that. But you are exactly right. And it really isn't, I can't think of a reason. I will tell you it will be a monthly theme. So I appreciate your eloquent
So I need to write that down, huh?
Yes, you do. Please write that down. Your very eloquent way of bringing this subject up. And it's weird because I can think of multiple times where I've walked a multi-year journey of clients selling their business and navigating that whole journey from the emotional aspect of selling your baby to the tactical aspect of valuation. How do you find a buyer? How do you structure things? And it is a really important topic if you own a business. So we're going to cover that in detail, Philip. I can't commit to the month, but I promise you it will be here within the next year or so. Within the next year. Can I say 12 months? Can I feel comfortable with that? I'm working on boundaries.
You can say what you like, and then I will
within the next year, Philip. So it's a great question.
You do it.
It's a great question. And if you don't own a business, I think there'll still be a lot of things that apply to you. So thank you, Philip. I got you. I got your back, man.
You'll have to come up with some exciting intro music for the final release of the Selling Your Business series. All right. So the next question is from Jim. First off, he says, there are many great retirement podcasts out there in cyberspace, but yours is my favorite. So good job. Now for his retirement strategy questions. My wife and I will retire in January of 23 when he is 65. They plan to delay starting Social Security withdrawals until he is 70. And at that time, they predict a benefit of $60,000. So his math shows that this scenario would give us $120,000 in gross income at that time, which solidly meets their retirement budget. As a bonus, we'll have whatever income we derive from the remaining investments, which we'll need to use for the 5 years from age 65 to 70. So the questions are, does this strategy have a name? And what are the pros and cons?
We're going to call this the Jim strategy of rocking retirement. And I think it might be helpful to listen to last month's series on withdrawal strategies. So it sounds like you have everything covered by your military pension, Social Security, et cetera. And that's being funded by what we call in my business, social capital. This is your minimum dignity floor that's more than going to cover your retirement budget. That is awesome. And then you just have your financial assets to fill the gaps. Like you said, those years while you're waiting for these guaranteed income sources to kick in. I think that's perfect.
He does ask if there are any rules of thumb to calculate having a more balanced income through retirement with this strategy.
There is. And again, I think last month's episode, we talked about that. Jim, the way I would approach this is you want to build a long-term cash flow model showing year by year the income sources that you're going to have, those that are inflation adjusted, those that are not. And then a year by year cash flow model of what your base needs are, to live a good life, not just housing and such, but your base needs for a good life. That's like the Maginot line, I think, from World War II that the French were trying to hold. And then I probably mispronounced that. And now someone just tell me and I'll look up the history. And then you have the wants, which are the more discretionary spending that you would love to have, but you could live without if you had to. And then the aspirational things. When you build that, what you'll find, and obviously tax estimates, what you'll find is how much deficit or surplus of income relative to spending on a year by year basis that you're forecasting. That's what you got to do. And then you can, once you have that, that's really important. And this is essentially what the class gets you to in the Rock Retirement Club. Check it out, rockretirementclub.com. In fact, we just released module 9, which is the final module of the masterclass, which gets to once we have this cash flow model, then you can pick how you're going to fill the gaps. So as an example, Jim, how do you smooth this out? Well, if you can determine if I need $40,000 a year from my financial assets, once you know that, you can build a floor, an income floor in front of you. So you already have the money sequestered or set aside that you need to get that extra $40,000 and pre-fund it. Essentially, like if you're a business owner, you create a payroll reserve. So you have a reserve to pay you a consistent paycheck. But you have to go through the process to get to that strategy to figure out those technical things. So maybe a simpler example might be, I'll just use myself and my business, right? Because I have lumpy cash flow because I have income from various sources. Sometimes I have huge months. Sometimes I have small months. If you look at my business bank accounts, I have 3 accounts. I have my cash flow account, which is like checking. That's where we pay bills and everything else. And then I have compensation reserve. And then I have profit reserve. So when I get $1 in to my account, I pre-fund my income for the rest of the year by taking every dollar and trying to build up my income reserve so I can give myself a consistent paycheck. So it's similar to that.
Last question. It's an easy one. It's from Gary. How do I find the 2 studies mentioned in the podcast about withdrawal rates?
This Saturday, 6-Shot Saturday email, we will have links to both studies for you.
Ta-da!
Is that
the shortest answer ever.
And if you're not signed up for 6-Shot Saturday, you can go to rogerwhitney.com. I believe it's right at the bottom. That's where we share links to things we talk about. Now let's go set a SMART sprint.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to set a little baby step we can take in the next 7 days to not just rock retirement, but rock life. Oh, it's so good that we have that down. In the next 7 days, I want you to review either with your spouse that manages things or with your advisor if you use an advisor. And if you're just doing it on your own and you're really a non-planner, I want you to think about your pie cake structure, meaning how are you going to pay for life in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term? And understand the strategy so you make sure that it fits who you are. This is a pretty easy one, especially if you're the non-manager of this, just have somebody else explain it to you. And hopefully you're catching a theme here that if you're the non-planner and you have a partner that is the planner or you have an advisor, especially, to revisit this and have them explain it to you in plain English so it makes sense to you, because you may feel inadequate from a knowledge perspective, but if they can explain it to you in very simple terms, you really know and intuit a lot more than you think you can. And if either one starts going off into gobbledygook land of statistical data and everything else, that means they're not explaining it well. That's on them, not on you, because this stuff isn't that difficult. It doesn't have to be technical terms. So just revisit that. Nicole, how do we do? You comfortable getting back on the show now?
Yes, I think so. I didn't have any tricky questions about pronunciation to throw me into a tongue twister whirlwind.
Now, next month, by the way, we're going to be focusing on tax management in retirement. We've done this topic before, but this is going to be fun because we're going to have Andy Panko on the show for the entire month. And Andy's the tax guy. He's much more than the tax guy, but he specializes in tax management in retirement because it's one of the biggest levers. And we're also going to have Wade Pfau from Retirement Researcher on to talk about his books as it relates to tax management. So we're going to have a little bit more geeky stuff going on.
Yeah, we are swinging extremely the other way next month.
Way the other way. So I'm excited about that. And I'm always excited to be able to chat with you and you, Nicole.
Have a great week, guys.
Hey, it's time for that all-important disclaimer. We so appreciate you listening to the show and love your questions and love the teaching that we're able to provide here. And actually, it helps us too. But remember, you're not our clients.
Not love it if you took advice from us on the show.
We would not love it if you took advice from us on the show. Realize this is helpful in education. Talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor before you make any decisions.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.